Hello and welcome to a writer's overview. This is a new series where I have a guest on to have a look at the stories written by a particular writer in order and see where you can identify the strengths and quirks of their particular writing style. And today I have a Lord Slard debutante in Mr. Will Maddox.
Hello, it is I, your boy Maddox on Twitter, or Maddox Productions 1 here on YouTube. I am here because we are discussing David Whitaker today. Is that not true?
Yeah, that is true. We're doing David Whitaker. I'll leave his Twitter and his YouTube in the description, and he has the most cursed Twitter on Doctor Who Twitter, so check that out if you like your cursed content. So, to start off with, we have The Edge of Destruction, which was the only episode David Whitaker wrote while he was still script editor of Doctor Who, because he was script editor from An Unearthly Child to the Dalek Invasion of Earth. And fun fact, he actually wanted to stay on longer, but he had only he'd signed on for another programme a year later after Doctor Who aired, because he started, because he thought Doctor Who wouldn't last more than a year. So that's the reason why he left quite early, only at the beginning of season 2. But The Edge of Destruction, so this was written as a couple of filler episodes, as they didn't have enough to kind of reach the end of this first period. I don't know quite how it works. BBC kind of policy is very, very confusing. But essentially they needed 2 episodes. But it's actually quite handy 2 episodes in the sense that it gives a chance for the TARDIS crew to recap and regroup and kind of come together a bit after 2 very chaotic adventures. Do you have any opening thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's sort of cool. I don't know if someone's actually officially described it as such, or if I just read this in a review, but I read it that An Unearthly Child is like there's this opening trilogy, An Unearthly Child is like the past story, the Daleks is like the future story, and then The Edge of Destruction was sort of conceived as like the sideways story in a sense. So you know, this brand new time travel show, we get to explore the past, we get to explore the future, and now we're sort of like having this middle story that's like focused on character development and stuff, which you
can go anywhere in time and space, but for the third story we spend an episode stuck in a ship because they pressed the button in too hard. It's the best way of describing The Edge of Destruction. But yeah. So it works as that character development episode, I absolutely agree. Because they were very busy, the last couple of adventures. There was plenty of time for character development, but there wasn't really a chance for the characters to really go through with each other how they were feeling, you know, and where they were at. And I feel that this was quite a good stopgap between the kind of, you know, William Hartnell, who's basically willing to throw anybody into a blender if he can get off the planet, to the William Hartnell who's actually going to stand up for Ian and Barbara, and obviously would later go on to stand up for pretty much anybody.
Yeah, and like An Unearthly Child and the Daleks, they both show that, you know, when they put their differences aside, they can like come together and like work for the greater good. But The Edge of Destruction is necessary for like smoothing over the cracks in their relationship and making sure they do remain a harmonious team from this point onwards, and that there's no, I mean, there is still like some conflict, like in the chase when they want to go home, but it's the episode that's necessary to have them finally confront each other and be like, sort of like figure out where they stand with each other now. If I'm making sense there.
It does. It clears the air for the characters, and then you have Marco Polo, where they spend, you know, months together. You know, possibly even. Well, I mean, that story must take you know, place over a span of quite a few months, and so you can kind of see that they've gone from, you know, unwilling adventurers together, you know, a kind of accidental kidnapping, if you will. Well, not even that accidental, but basically, like, they go from kidnappee to kidnapper to, you know, becoming friends. So it starts on this story where they kind of, you know, work out where they stand with each other, as you said, and then in Marco Polo, that's when they kind of, once everything's kind of calmed down with all of that, they get to know each other a bit, and they become friends, and it's a very fruitful relationship from then on.
Can you imagine Marco Polo, but without any like Edge of Destruction beforehand, so they just go into Marco Polo, but they're still butting heads. That would be so weird.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the John Lucarotti was given the brief of the okay, so these characters had a lot of differences before, but they've kind of smoothed over them a bit now, possibly, because David Whitaker is very good at handling characters and character development and place trajectories for characters to go on. There's a little bit of it in this episode, but it's something we'll certainly be talking about later in the stories where he introduces companions.
Yeah. And I think Edge of Destruction is the story where Barbara really fully comes into her own, because I love Barbara. She's like a great negotiator type character, and I think Edge of Destruction is that, because I think Ian is mostly hogging the spotlight in An Unearthly Child and the Daleks, but Edge of Destruction is really Barbara's time to shine and be like, listen, you old twat, if it wasn't for us, you'd have died, you ungrateful hoe.
It's funny you mentioned Barbara and An Unearthly Child, because that's actually another thing that I might bring up, because David Whitaker actually had to heavily edit the original draft of An Unearthly Child, the whole story written by Anthony Coburn, because basically he was a bit of a sexist. And like he wrote Barbara being drunk when she was following Susan home, and then Ian making weird sexist comments towards her.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so David Whitaker, really good job there. An Earthly Child has aged like fine wine, and it's entirely due to you. And if you don't believe me about Anthony Coburn, go listen to The Masters of Luxor, which is a Lost Stories script by him. Yeah, I mean, the story's fine, it's enjoyable, but some of the gender politics is not the best.
Oh dear. Well, aren't all history teachers made of glass in a wet... No, okay.
Yeah, so just quickly before we move on from Edge of Destruction, do you have anything to say about the plot? Because we've talked about the characters, but we've got to remember that something does actually happen in the story.
Yeah, there is a story.
Somewhat. It revolves around scissors or something.
The character drama is basically the main focus of the story, and so the plot just kind of feels like this weird, not afterthought, but it's not as much effort put into the actual narrative, I don't think, and I honestly still don't really understand it. Like,
oh, right, okay, I'll explain it here. So basically, there's a switch on the TARDIS called the fast return switch, and when you press it, you go to the previous location. If you press it twice, you go back to the location before the previous location. So what the Doctor does is he presses it twice to go back to 1963 to drop off Ian and Barbara. But because he accidentally presses it in too much, and that means that the TARDIS is going to start infinitely going backwards through time. And the TARDIS, if it does that, if it goes back through all of its cycles right at the beginning of time, that's going to destroy the TARDIS. So the TARDIS tries to subliminally warn the TARDIS crew through showing them planets and clocks and scissors and making them go mad. Yeah, that's a bit where it loses me.
Because, like, the story also has really strange priorities, because it's sort of, for the first part at least, it sort of lingers on the possibility of, what if something's got into the ship? What if one of them is possessed? But then it's like, no, it's a spring. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well, that would have been a much more interesting story if one of them had actually been possessed.
Yeah.
Now, that would have been like midnight 50 years early.
Yeah, then Susan just stabs a bed, and then, like, Susan's acting really strangely in this story, but she seems to, like, shift allegiances.
Yeah, that's weird. And when it comes to that kind of bit, I can't say I'm still entirely sure of what was going on there. But I don't know, you've got I mean, people always complain about stories that kind of end because, there's a big red button ending where, like for instance, Journey's End, where Donna's just able to press a big red button to end the plot. And in this one, it doesn't just end because of the button, it starts because of the buttons. This is the ultimate big red button story. That's all I've got to say about it.
That's true. Although, as I said earlier, since the plot of The Edge of Destruction isn't really that important, it's the character development, pretty much. I think that big red button thing is softened by the fact that the character drama isn't really resolved until the Doctor goes to Barbara and gives her a coat, pretty much.
Yeah. So it's an inauspicious start for David Whitaker as, a writer of his own stories rather than just script editor. But he did succeed in his goal of developing the characters, even if the plot isn't that great. So we're going to move on now to The Rescue, which is the first episode after David Whitaker quit as script editor. And it is just after the Daleks' invasion of Earth, which means it's the story just after Susan's left, and the first story for the new companion, Vicky, who is my favourite. Would you like to open us up on that, Will?
Yeah, it's a pretty cute story, really. Like, I don't think it sets the world on fire like some people say. Like, I did see someone on Twitter be like, The Rescue is my favourite 60s story, and I'm just like, okay, I wouldn't go that far. But
Was that a New Who fan? It's like, this is one of the only ones where they could pay attention for the whole thing.
Wouldn't surprise me. But like, it's a very functional story which really effectively introduces Vicky and has like, even if like the mystery of Coquillian is like kind of stupefyingly obvious, it's
is it bad that I had no idea when I first watched it?
I probably didn't either, but like it's one of those things where like, oh, every time you come back to it, it's like, oh, it's so blindingly obvious, like.
Yeah, I think it's because I first watched it when I was like, a child, so I think it's one of those things where it works great when it's children watching it, and any adults with like reasonably functional brains should be able to work it out.
Yeah, it's like, why? So Coquillian doesn't leave the ship, but Bennett says he has, and there's only one exit out of the spaceship as far as Vicky is concerned.
When you go in between the ship, from the main bit of the ship to Bennett's room, there's a gap in the side, remember? Because it's crashed. It's like jagged along a mountain, so he could just go through the side.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Okay, maybe that was a nitpick on my part, but
facts again, and logic, Lord Slar defeats Will Maddox.
I have no choice but to submit. But it's another two-parter that is where the plot, again, it kind of takes a backseat to the character development, but I think the plot is definitely more solid than Edge of Destruction.
I feel that Rescue is definitely the best two-parter of Classic Who, because it's not trying to do too much, so it can focus on what it does effectively. Because the best 45-minute Doctor Who episodes are the ones that are just hyper-focused, because you can't do that much in 40, 50 minutes. Not when you have to set up a whole new set of characters and a whole new world and a whole new plot every single time. And this is hyper-focused on just, there's, we're introducing the new companion, we're giving her a good reason to want to come on board with the Doctor. We've got, a bit of a kind of mystery plot going on to keep interest throughout the episode. It's really good stuff. It's quality stuff. And it's the perfect way to introduce a companion in the sense that it gives them a really good jumping off point for future development, in the sense that, Vicky is somebody who really, really needs company. It really craves company after being alone for so long with one not very pleasant man. And also needs that father figure in the same way that the Doctor, because he's lost Susan, needs that granddaughter figure. And so they both kind of latch onto each other because of that. And we see that play out in quite a few subsequent stories as well. Yeah, and it's a very it's not really laid back, but it's like that, a really comfortable like breather episode that is really effective in introducing the new companion and establishing, right, they're missing something, the Doctor's missing something, they form a bond, there's a brief squabble over Sandy, and then it's all not fine. Sandy! Rip Sandy, man. My favourite character. He only wanted food. Another thing I want to compliment is how strong the world building is for a 45-minute episode where we only get one glimpse of the actual inhabitants of the planet. It's like
Yeah.
somehow like I have a pretty good grasp of what the planet was like, even though we barely see any of it. Which that's good writing to be able to do that and make it not feel like exposition, because it's all kind of told through exposition, but it doesn't feel like it because of the way it's kind of delivered in small drips and drabs at the right moments.
And the Doctor's like, "Oh yes, I've been here before," sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's how he does it. It's like, yeah, it is just exposition, but the way it's kind of delivered makes it not feel like ham-fisted, and it's kind of that's really the best you can do in such a short story, really.
Yeah, it's a cute, perfectly solid introduction story, and I think it's definitely the point where the first Doctor, like, people always like they exaggerate the first Doctor's snarling, like, grumpiness, and because it was never really that full on, but there is definitely
Basically, they've seen an unearthly child in the Daleks and think that that's the first Doctor.
pretty much, yeah. But while it is definitely not nowhere near that intense, there is definitely a kind of shift between with the rescue, like the like when he sits down with Vicky, he's like, "Oh, you don't really want to stay here, do you? I'll talk to Mr. Bennett," sort of thing. And there is a really believable grandfatherly bond there that's way more convincing than any interaction he ever had with Susan.
Yeah, it's weird with Susan. He always was way too overprotective, and obviously that was part of kind of the character arc that Susan went through, especially in the Daleks' invasion of Earth, where it's about the Doctor having to realise that Susan's quite capable by herself and needs her independence. And then, when he gets to Vicky, he having learned that lesson, he's able to be a lot, more kind of relaxed and with a twinkle in his eye.
Yeah, and it's a really great moment. So far, David Whitaker's showing that he's really great at bringing characters into new phases of their lives, pretty much.
Yeah,
Stories.
and it's impressive he's managed to do that, given that he's basically been given, like, right, we need you to write the shit filler episodes that nobody else wants to do. And then actually making them pretty
much.
Good. It's like, it's like Gareth Roberts often gets that job in the new series, but most of his episodes are shit, so there's a difference.
Yeah, that's true. Next is The Crusade.
Okay, I guess I didn't realise we're on Maddox Productions channel.
Okay, I'll let you do it. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No.
Okay.
No,
I'm leading the charge now.
So next story is Doctor Who and the Crusades, written by David Whitaker, and definitely doesn't feature any blackface. So, what do you think of the Crusades?
I have watched the actual story itself a handful of times, and I have listened to the audiobook reading of the novelization, which lasts for like 4 hours or something.
4 hours? Jesus.
I can't remember how long. It was definitely a really long time. And the novelization is definitely way more like brutal. Like Barbara gets whipped at one point. It's quite unpleasant.
Well, it's pretty brutal anyway for a 1960s story.
Yeah. Because like it's a story about like it is kind of eye-rolling that before Barbara even gets to say a single thing in the story, oh, she's kidnapped. Like, oh, okay. But it is also it's also the moment that makes me kind of realize what Barbara's function usually is in a story. Like, sure, she often does get kidnapped by the villain, but her perspective is to sort of like help develop the villain's point of view in a way. Like she tries to understand where they're coming from in a way, and that happens in like a few other stories, like the Romans. Even though the Monotra aren't villains, it happens in the Web Planet as well. And the Crusade is kind of the moment where I had that realization of what Barbara's her role, how necessary her role is in the Hartnell era, in a sense.
Yeah, I think to touch upon that point. So, for those who don't know, the Crusades, that was events basically where people from Europe were going to try and retake the Holy Land, which is kind of, Jerusalem, that kind of area of the Middle East, from the Muslims who had been living there for hundreds of years after the Islamic conquests. And it was quite a brutal time. And often, especially back then, it's kind of portrayed as, oh, jolly King Richard the Lionheart goes and, smashes the evil Saracens. But what I love about this story is it takes a much more realistic view of what it was like, of what the kind of different sides of the Crusades were like. And it kind of shows the much more sophisticated side of, the Islamic Empire and the Saracens. And, you get to see Saladin and Saladin. And, sure, Elakir, he's like a horrible, horrible bastard. But like, there's, it's not like it's just portraying them as like these kind of evil horde. It's like, Saladin's very sophisticated and very intelligent, and arguably is portrayed more so than Richard the Lionheart, who is portrayed as quite emotional and brash.
Yeah, there's no bias towards Richard the Lionheart, because they are sort of depicting how like he's like scheming to get, is it Joanna? Is it Joanna's his sister?
Yes.
Yeah, he's like scheming to get her married off without her consent, and like how rash he's being, basically. So it's not like a this culture flawless, this culture bad kind of story. It is like,
so yeah, we kind of a lot of what we've been discussing is how good David Whitaker is with the characters, and what a great story this is for Barbara.
Yeah, like as I said earlier, she gets to understand the villain's point of view, and also like she is captured with, I can't remember that guy's name, and then they both plan to be in disguise as Richard and Joanna.
William, I'm pretty sure his name is.
Yeah. And that's pretty good. Oh, and Ian gets knighted in this story, and that's fabulous.
Yeah, that's great. That's a fun moment. Although I'd say Ian probably gets the weakest story between them. So Barbara goes through this really like horrible ordeal, where basically because she humiliated this guy Elakir in front of Saladin, he like tries to kidnap her and put her in his harem, which very kid friendly this, but it's very good, and you get a lot of characters who in the town who really hate Elakir, and I like how that's portrayed. I think that's a really compelling story there that maybe has a slightly rushed resolution, but overall is good. And then the Doctor and Vicky get some really fun court intrigue, which, that's watching the first Doctor in court intrigue is always great fun. And Vicky goes on with it very well. Whereas Ian is basically stuck between the two plots, where he's kind of in the court intrigue, but then he fucks off, and then we barely see him until he arrives at Barbara, who, Barbara's already basically safe by the time Ian arrives. Ian's just there like, here's a horse. Get on me horse.
If it's a story where the first Doctor like worms his way into a position of power or becomes good frenemies with a popular historical figure, then we're in for a great time, pretty much. And the Crusade does not disappoint in that regard.
Yeah, Crusade, brilliant story. I think it's one of the most underrated stories from the 60s. I think it's brilliant myself.
I agree. It made my honourable mentions in my first Doctor top 10.
Oh, it'd definitely be in my top 10 first Doctor stories, no doubt about it. I think it might even make the top 5, to be honest. Maybe. I don't know, it's a really strong one. But anyway, so let's move on from that one. So the next episode we are going to be discussing is The Power of the Daleks.
Now we are moving into my domain.
Your domain? You claim Power of the Daleks. You claim Power of the Daleks over me.
I claim the Troughton era.
I am the eternal Power of the Daleks stan.
Because if you're do you like the Hartnell era more than the Troughton era?
They're kind of both just as good as each other. I mean, they're both kind of my favourites.
Right, because I was going to say, if I'm the king of Troughton, you're the king of Hartnell.
So everybody on this channel already knows how much I love Power of the Daleks, so I think I'll just kind of give the floor to you, Will. It's because, everybody knows how much I love it and why I love it. So let's hear a different perspective.
Yeah, like it's a story that every time I rewatch it, I get an epiphany of like how brilliant it is, like how clever. I hate to use this word, how genius it is. I hate using that word because people describe Moffat with that word, and that's
Oh,
annoying.
it's so clever!
But like, it's a story that really emphasizes the Daleks' cunning, manipulative side, and that element was always present in like some of the Hartnell Dalek stories, like in the original Dalek story, where they were like, "Give them food and water; it will lure them into a false sense of security." Like that was always a thing, but it's really Power of the Daleks that like amplifies that to the extreme. And
Can I just say that for me, the psychological horror of the Daleks is far more scary than the kind of physical threat of the Daleks.
Yeah.
Like how they're able to manipulate people. Those are always the best Dalek episodes. Think, obviously the Daleks, Power of the Daleks, Dalek in New Who, that one manipulates Rose. It's always when the Daleks are shown to be, they're not just these kind of, army of robotic creatures. They are very, very clever. They know exactly how we think. They want to kill us all, but they're willing to bide their time and find ways to get us to, do what they want. In this situation, all it takes is just a little bit of political instability, and they're able to exploit that to their advantage.
Yeah, and it's also really great as a regeneration story because I love the first regeneration because it would have been so easy to do like the New Who thing where it's just like Hartnell turns into Troughton and then Troughton is immediately like, "Don't worry, it's me, trust me, I have all these memories, you can believe it's me." They thankfully don't take that route because that would kind of feel like anticlimactic. Power of the Daleks has him still teasing he's the Doctor but not outright saying it, so like it's hard to tell if you can trust him. But with the Daleks as well, like obviously it's a Dalek story, so they're going to be like evil gits, but with the Doctor being with him being
unconvincing, shall we say?
Yeah,
enigmatic.
Yeah. With the Doctor being unconvincing on one side and the Daleks being distressingly, eerily good on
Compliant.
the other side. Yeah, you're better with words than I am, but it's sort of like it sort of puts the audience in the seat to be like, who do I trust, if you know what I mean? And obviously it's the Doctor in the end, because the Doctor's like, no, the Daleks, they're evil.
It's very important to, when you watch the story, think about the context of 1966 and when it was made. And I think on that level, it works in a really genius way. The way I always compare it is to Bad Wolf Party of the Ways, where Chris Eccleston basically expositions to the audience about what's going to happen next. Because that was the reintroduction of regeneration, because a lot of viewers then wouldn't have known about it, because they may not have seen Classic Who. But then here, the first ever regeneration, the first time it needs to be explained, they don't go outright and say it, because wouldn't that be so boring if we just said, yes, this is regeneration, I'm the same person, but different personality, blah, blah, blah. That'd be like, Chibnall dialogue. But instead, it's actually made as something that's meant to make the audience think, get the audience interested, like, what is going on? What is the nature of what's going on? We're not sure. It's something to keep everybody hooked. And then Ben and Polly are used quite cleverly here, because Polly kind of represents the side that are kind of really going along with this new Doctor, and they're quite happy with this new Doctor, whereas Ben's kind of representing the fans that are a bit more cynical and aren't really sure about what they think about this, unexpected event.
Yeah, I've never actually considered that before, so that's great, and it's certainly way better than how they fucking use Clara in Deep Breath as an audience surrogate.
Oh, you couldn't get more different. And so we've talked about how great the Daleks and the Doctor and the companions are, but how great is the world building and the side characters here? Like, we get a really good political landscape, which was important because that is what the Daleks exploit.
Yeah, and it's like not only are the Daleks manipulative, but like so are some of these rebels. Like Janley, ooh, she's She's a sneaky one, she is.
She's a great character, though.
Yeah, she's a great character, and she's one of the few female villains of the 60s, as far as I can remember.
The thing, she's quite a conflicted character, because she's not an out-and-out villain, because you get the feeling she kind of has the right intentions, but just is one of those ends justify the means kind of people, and that takes it too far.
Because that technician, I can't remember his name, dies, and she uses that to have a hold over Lesterson. Like, you were responsible for his death. If that were to get out, then you would be ruined. It's really great.
I think another interesting way to think of it is so the Daleks, as we all know, are kind of a political allegory for fascism and Nazism, and almost, I don't know how intentional this was, but you can kind of look at it as a kind of, you know, not quite a metaphor, but almost kind of it is kind of like where, you know, fascism comes in to exploit unstable political situations, and, you know, trying to be that kind of, we're the guard against the revolution, or we're going to help your revolution, or whatever. Because, you know, in real life, you've got instances where, like, you know, in, say, Nazi Germany or in fascist Italy, they got in power because of fear of communism. They got in there because the kind of the politicians who were in charge were more scared of communism than they were of fascism. And here we've got the Daleks being used in a political situation where it's like, you know, we want to achieve our political goals, and we're going to use you as a tool. So, like, the people in charge of of Germany just before Hitler became Chancellor thought they could use Hitler to their advantage. They could use Hitler as a political tool to serve their own ends, and it didn't work because he just ended up taking power and purging everybody. And that's kind of what happens here. It's like that you know, they're happy to be your servants and be compliant and work with you until their usefulness has expired.
Yeah. And it's chilling. It's really great. And it helps to characterize the Daleks better, because, as I said, they were already pretty well characterized, but this really opens up a new sadistic dimension to them, like a sneaky, manipulative extra layer on top of the Dalek mentality, in a sense.
All right, so I think with Circle Jerk of Power of the Daleks, quite enough. I mean, you can never do it enough, but for the sake of time, we'll have to move on to Enemy of the Worlds.
Didn't he do Evil of the Daleks?
Oh, yes, he did. I always forget Evil of the Daleks. Okay, right you are. Go on.
I'm reading the Wikipedia page for it, so that's how I knew. Another great story that also helps to emphasize the Daleks' manipulative nature, because they manipulate the Doctor.
Yeah, and my only problem with this one is the manipulation doesn't really make any sense. So they manipulate the Doctor into giving them the human factor for some reason. Because, like, for one, why do they need the human factor? It's never really spelled out why the human factor would actually help the Daleks. And for two, why do they need the Doctor to get the human factor? They never explained that either. It's like, if they hadn't got the Doctor involved and had just done it themselves, they probably would have been able to do it without getting Scarecrow destroyed.
Didn't they say the Doctor working on the human factor shows them what the Dalek factor is? Like, they use reverse psychology or something to...
Yeah, but couldn't they just do that with regular humans?
Probably.
They didn't need to involve the Doctor.
But they wanted to spread it through the entire history of Earth, which I guess they could have done themselves because they have time machines.
They have time corridors.
Yeah. That's a good point, but, you know, let's just say that the Daleks are sadistic bastards who want the Doctor to suffer.
That's always been my one big criticism of this story, is that the central plot just kind of falls apart the moment you really stop to think about it. And I always have a bone to pick for people who think that this is somehow better than Power of the Daleks, the absolute masterpiece that it is. It's a good story. It's got some great characters, but the plot does kind of fall apart a bit at times. And whereas Power of the Daleks moves at an absolutely relentless pace of just slow burn, valve release, all hell breaks loose. It's a really satisfying episode in terms of pace. Whereas here, the story starts off strong, then kind of sags really, really badly, especially around episode 6, and then picks up in episode 7. It's like it starts off good, gets honestly a bit crap, and then only starts becoming good again in episode 7. It's like they should have went to Scarecrow an episode earlier than they did, because this bit on Scarecrow was great, but feels like it could have done with more time, whereas they spend way too long in Maxtable's house.
That's a fair enough criticism. Forgive me, Lord Slur. There was a period in my life where I did prefer evil over power, but
Blasphemer!
that time is long since over. I have seen the light. I pledge fealty.
You are forgiven, my son.
Thank you, O Lord Slur. But yeah, it's still a good story, and it does David Whitaker doing character drama, so the Doctor and Jamie fall out for a bit, and the Doctor manipulates Jamie into doing the tasks, which is sneaky. It does add like a little because some people just call Troughton, just the bumbling clown Doctor. It's like no,
that's Matt Smith.
Yeah, that is Matt Smith. The bumbling clown rapist Doctor. But yeah, the second Doctor has like quite a he's still continuing that sort of manipulative streak in like using reverse psychology to trick Jamie into doing the tasks, and that does flesh him out some more. And it's the introduction of Victoria, who is one of the most underrated companions in all of Doctor Who, even if she doesn't have much to do in this story. But, credit where it's due.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things we're kind of seeing as a pattern with David Whitaker stories is the characters always brilliant. The plots often are a bit overthought. I mean, obviously the Crusade and the Power of the Daleks, great. But then you've got the Edge of Destruction and Evil of the Daleks, where it's like, yeah, you didn't really think this through, did you? And in fact, we'll come on to the Wheel in Space next. Well, not next, but after Enemy of the World. But that's definitely another time where David Whitaker just clearly he does the characters great. Almost everything about it's really good, apart from just the plot just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Should we delve into Victoria real quick? Because I think she doesn't. Because a lot of people just write her off as, just a damsel, just a one-dimensional.
Well, why don't we move on to Enemy of the World and do it there? Because I feel that's a more appropriate story to kind of talk about Victoria.
Okay, that's fair enough.
But you're absolutely right to point out that yes, this is yet another David Whitaker companion introduction, and again gives her a very good jumping off point. Just lost a father. Going into a weird new world with, these people. It's a good place to start for this character development. Again.
Yeah, and people think the show isn't self-aware of her meek nature, but, we'll get more in depth into that.
Yeah,
later.
Enemy of the World. Let's just move on with that, because I don't think we've got much else to say about Evil of the Daleks.
Enemy of the World, one of the sexiest Doctor Who stories ever.
Yeah, it's a very, very strong story. This one, like Power of the Daleks, has again that good relentless pace and slow burn, and then kind of when it gets to episode 6, all hell breaks loose and everything gets revealed. And it's like, oh, it all makes sense now. So it's basically Doctor Who does Bond in a very interesting way with Patrick Troughton playing two characters. Which how amazing is Patrick Troughton in terms of the fact that he can play two roles so well that you can't even tell it's the same actor.
He's technically playing 4 roles. He plays the Doctor, he plays Salamander, he plays the Doctor pretending to be Salamander, and he plays Salamander pretending to be the Doctor.
That's true! How much range does this man have?
And you can tell, like, almost all the time as well. And it's really great. He's so nuanced, I love him. And it's a really great espionage story with a plethora of wonderful characters. Giles Kent, mwah. Love him. Astrid Ferrier, one of the best supporting characters of ever.
Ferrier?
I like Ferrier the chef.
No,
she's great.
No, Griffin is the chef.
Oh, right, yeah. She's the Ferrier is the food taster, sorry. I got muddled up with my words. But, yeah, Griffin, just relatable.
What a man. What a man. No, he just lifts up the panels. He was like, oh, terrible, terrible. They'll probably shoot me. Nah, the firing squad would miss. It's just, I'm so sad he's
the
no more.
food taster.
Yeah, she's a brilliant character. And then you've got Bruce. He's another great character. Salamander. What's the name of the Bennick? The really slimy little guy.
Yeah,
he's such great. I mean, he's been in Doctor Who a few times, but he's always the best at playing just the most horrible, slimy gits possible.
Salamander himself is probably one of the best humanoid villains in all of Doctor Who. He starts off as like, oh, this politician is shady, let's investigate him. And like, yeah, you get the sense that something is wrong with him, but there's just not enough. There's not enough to convict him until that moment in part 4 when he goes down in the lift and, oh, you fucking bastard.
Yeah, it's like, it's such a mad scheme, but it does make sense. And it's like, wow, this is really cool. It's like, and this has so many great three-dimensional side characters. I think it just goes to show what you can achieve with a really good writer given 6 parts to ply their trade, where, he's got all that time to do all of this world building and character building, and it just makes it so memorable, and I get so invested every time I watched it. It's great.
Yeah.
Not a dull moment.
A story about a politician abusing human rights to gain more power, and that is such a... Woo! That's topical. And it's brilliant.
And it even has the best Australian accent ever. Some crazy nuts dancing a jig. In fact, no, I think that was actually too good of an impression compared to his.
Also, can we appreciate how it's a story where the Doctor has a doppelganger, and the story's just like, okay, how do we use that to our advantage? Because in New Who, or not specifically in New Who, but like, okay, yeah, like in the Capaldi era when like the Doctor looks exactly like that guy from like Pompeii, the story's like so obsessed with like, but why do I look like this guy? And I'm glad Enemy of the World doesn't take that route, because that would just be tedious. Like, can you imagine like the second Doctor just be like, but why does Salamander look like me? Is it like fate or something? Like, that would be crap. And I'm
William
glad
Hartnell dreamt of being an evil dictator while he died.
Who found me like Arc of Infinity? Why did I regenerate into Maxwell? So crap, and I'm glad Classic Who avoids that. And Enemy of the World is all the better for it.
So you said you wanted to have a little spiel about Victoria, didn't you?
Victoria, she is a brilliant character. Like, because a load of people are just like, oh, she's just a damsel. All she does is scream, and like, just damsel, pathetic. It's sexist. It's like, no, it's not. Because like they act like the show isn't self-aware that she is, like, even in Evil of the Daleks, when she and Kemmel are in the prison cell, and she has that moment where I can't remember what she says to Kemmel, like, oh, are you scared, Kemmel? Don't worry, I will protect you. And then they sort of like have a cheeky like wink wink laugh over that, because they know that she's
I mean, I'm sorry, Deborah Watling, but I would rather have Sonny Caldinez protecting me than you.
Yeah. And like, people act like, oh, all she did is scream and cry and be useless in the corner. But there are so many stories that emphasize that, yes, she is like that, but she's not useless. She uses that to her advantage, like in Tomb of the Cybermen, when she screams to distract Captain, so Captain Hopper can take her gun. Or like in the Ice Warriors, when the Doctor like mimes her to cry, and then she does, and then he tells her the plan to poison the Ice Warrior with ammonium sulfide. And then in Fury from the Deep, which is basically a love letter to Victoria's character, where it's like, see, Victoria's scream actually defeats the monster. It's a really cool subversion of the damsel trope, in a sense. Like, she is not just a damsel, she is actively trying, like, even if she is shit scared of everything, she is still actively trying to use that to the Doctor's advantage, and to like help day.
No, she's great. She's clearly a very intelligent character, and who's just always held back in these kind of adventures by her pretty much crippling anxiety of danger, which in the end makes her realise that this travelling guff isn't for me.
Yeah, and it's really great characterization, and I know we kind of went off on a tangent, but David Whitaker is kind of responsible for that, considering he introduced the character, basically. So
absolutely, and she gets a great outing here. I mean, Victoria's doing espionage here. Like, And, she's actively taking part, like, questioning people and learning things. It's not like she's just along for the ride.
Yeah, like that great scene at the end when the Doctor's pretending to be Salamander and, like, is tricking Jamie and Victoria into, like, confessing what they've learned in front of Bruce, and Victoria's, like, really adamant, like, why does Salamander need so many guards? Like, all that. It's really great and stuff. And, there's also that great scene with Griffin where she's like...
Kaiser pudding.
It's
like, marvellous pudding.
And, like, she's so done with this shit as well. It's like, write down the ingredients. First course, interrupted by a bomb explosion. Anyway, we've gushed about, like, Power of the Daleks and Enemy of the World. Just pretty much half of the
Chef's kiss.
I could just bang on about them for years, pretty much. Whew. Maybe that's another collab someday. We just gangbang? You know what I mean? Suck over the Trouton.
Look, I mean, jerking off behind the shed is one thing. A gangbang is too far.
Yeah, I used the wrong word. Sorry. So yeah, he has a great run so far, and then we hit the wheel in space.
Oh. Man. I mean, it's okay. No, like I don't mind the wheel in space. The first two episodes are pretty good. Episode 6 isn't bad. The characters throughout are quite compelling, and the whole lot of David Whitaker's trade. The only problem is it is one like I don't like how often people say that a story didn't need to be 6 parts, but this is a story that didn't need to be 6 parts, mainly because it doesn't actually have any idea of what it wants to do. And the plot is so confusing and nonsensical. I mean, just anybody watching this who, doesn't know what I'm talking about, go watch Mr. TARDIS's review of The Wheel in Space. He really expertly goes into why The Wheel in Space doesn't actually make any sense whatsoever.
I haven't seen his review yet. I will once he's finished with the Cybus Ember.
So they have this ridiculously convoluted plan to take over the wheel, which basically requires the Doctor and Jamie to land on the Silver Carrier at the beginning. Otherwise, they were just going to blow up the ship that they were on.
Yeah. Like, why is there a bit... I know there's a bit where the servo robot releases, like, the cyber eggs or whatever.
Yeah, because
they fly around.
So what they do
they fly back into the rocket, and the Cybermen stay there, and then are taken in the crate to the wheel?
So what happens... So basically, the Cyberman's plan is to send the Silver Carrier off course, and then send the Cybermat over to the ship to destroy the Benalium stocks, because the Benalium powers their X-ray laser, and then they were going to come across to the Silver Carrier to find that there was actually Benalium on board, which they'd have to do because the Cybermen had directed a meteor storm at the wheel, despite the fact that they want the wheel to be alive, so why would they send a meteor storm at it? But so then they have to get the Benalium stocks from the Silver Carrier, but once the people are on, then they get the Cybermen to hide inside the Benalium crates and then take them back over, and that's how the Cybermen get on board.
They could have probably just landed a ship in a dock and just massacred everyone. Like, that would have probably been way easier.
Yeah, the Cyber Planter's the most pretentious fucker on the planet.
Reporter, you know our ways. They rock back and forth. That's my favourite bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're just high, This is the kind of plan you'd come up with when you're high, too. So convoluted.
Yeah, it's the next... Because doesn't Trouton go on holiday for episode 2?
Yeah.
That's a thing that happens.
Yeah, he's in a food coma from all that, from the big Sunday dinner they eat.
Yeah, I also don't really get why Jamie lies to Gemma. Like, why doesn't he just say, listen, our property is on the rocket, can you take it off, please? Instead of being like, don't blow it up, I'm going to sabotage.
Yeah, he didn't even think to ask them first. If he'd asked them, they said fuck off, then, then fair enough. It's like, you've got to do what you got to do. But, yeah, that is a good point.
But still, Trouton is really relaxed in the story, so that's great. He's, like, in bed for 2 episodes. And it's a decent introduction for Zoe as well. Like, unfortunately, this never really comes up again. But she has a few cool moments where she's like, "Oh, I'm sick of being like a like a fact bank. I want to feel things." And then future stories don't really
Well, I mean,
elaborate
I
on
don't think they don't explicitly go after it, but I feel that it's implicit in a lot of stories. In the sense that all of a sudden she's she, like in this episode, she's all about facts don't care about your feelings, Snowflake. But then she actually learns to go out and enjoy things in a lot of the future stories. Obviously, the Dominators definitely isn't a good first adventure for her
God.
in that sense. But then you've got stuff like the Mind Robber, the Invasion, the War Games, that kind of thing, where she does get to explore, and the Seeds of Death, where she gets to kind of break out of the mould that she was put in her society, and be a bit more expressive.
I guess it's a case of showing instead of telling. So
yeah, but it's another great example of David Whitaker setting up a character with good motivation, because like a lot of people, they just travel and tell it's like, oh yeah, I just like space. But with Zoe, it's like she actually has a deep emotional reason to want to travel, like Vicky did.
They have an I want, like that cliche that all Disney princesses have, like an I want song. Like that's Doctor Who companions. Just I want, and then they go on the TARDIS and get what they want.
Yeah, I mean she's like the Tin Man for this VOD. I want the heart,
Yeah, that's great.
And then Victoria's the Cowardly Lion. I don't know, who's the Scarecrow? Like, Jamie? Jamie.
Yes.
Needs to find the brain. And then that's his story out, because in the War Games, then he's like, all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, I'm in charge of an army and I'm doing quite well. He finds his brain.
But yeah, I do think it's a shame because a lot of people give the Troutman era shit for being repetitive, but I think that's unfair, especially when it comes to Cyberman stories, because I think the Moonbase, Tomb of the Cybermen, and the Invasion all do drastically different things with the Cybermen, but the Wheel in Space is an unfortunate instance.
It doesn't do anything with them.
Yeah, it's just kind of generic invasion, whatever kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's
so
it's basically just a repeat of what they were trying to do in the Moonbase, basically. So that's.
So let's move on from the Purgatory in Space to the Ambassadors of Death. So this has David Whitaker as the credited writer, although we should bear in mind this had extensive rewrites by Terrence Dix, Malcolm Hulke, and Trevor Ray. And I think a particular thing you can see the hallmark of Malcolm Hulke on is the fact that the main enemy is a general, which, of course it's a general. The main enemy is always a general in Malcolm Hulke's stories.
But can we talk about how we had 3 of the greatest Doctor Who writers ever working on this same story?
Yeah, but it's a great story, don't get me wrong, but I do feel this is a case of too many chefs spoils the broth. Because it's a great idea, it's got some great characters, and when you watch it, it's like, I feel that this should be one of the best ever Doctor Who stories, but it's just a tad overwritten in places and underwritten in other places.
That's fair enough. Sorry, I'm just looking up what Trevor Ray did, because I've never heard of him before.
Yeah, there's too much. There's a bit too much going on at times in this story, and it feels like it needed another rewrite, and then it would have been like one of the best ever. But as it stands, it's a really strong conspiracy story in the same kind of vein of Enemy of the World, and yeah, it's a really interesting plot where it's like the aliens aren't the bad guys. The aliens have been kidnapped by people on Earth who want to provoke a war between Earth and the aliens, who've just sent ambassadors.
It's a great, interesting subversion, and it's really cool in emphasis because season 7 was this fresh and new reinvention of Doctor Who. Now we're Earthbound, and the threat comes to us. So it's interesting for the 3rd adventure. The threat isn't really a threat at all, but it's humans.
I've just now figured out the problem with this story. You know what I was saying earlier? There's too many layers to this conspiracy, and it feels very, very bloated. Like, how many different times do different characters turn out to appear in the story and turn out to be working for the conspiracy, then they're exposed and then killed? Like, how many? It happens to so many characters.
That's a good point, yeah.
And it's just like, it needed to be a bit more condensed and focused on just maybe a few instances better done. But if it had done that, it would have just been brilliant. Because as it is a strong story. It just, yeah, it screams of a story that had too many writers working on it.
That's a valid criticism to give. But it's still really great. I think. I can't think of anything. I was about to go in depth about. Oh, it's so well directed, but that's got fuck all to do with David Whitaker. So.
Oh yeah, because we haven't actually discussed the direction throughout. But just to say, pretty much every David Whitaker story is very well directed. I mean, Chris Barry and Douglas Camfield did a lot of them, so of course it was. This one's Michael Ferguson, who Michael Ferguson is great as well.
Yeah, it's also one of the best stories for the Brigadier, I think, because I think the unit formula only really reaches its full potential in season 7, if I'm going to be honest, because later seasons, especially season 8, just kind of treat unit as an afterthought. They're just kind of there, and the Doctor's just.
Well, I mean, season 7 in general is better for the Brigadier because basically the Brigadier slowly becomes more and more of a caricature as the Third Doctor era goes on.
Yeah,
like he kind of starts off as this kind of respectable, open-minded, army man who does have a bit of a rough side, but most of the time he's all right. Whereas later on, it's just like Brigadier is just funny, stubborn man, especially in the Three Doctors.
Oh God, that story.
Like he is literally just funny, stubborn man at that point. And then you've got stuff like Collins, who's like, "Doctor, come back here immediately, Doctor."
But yeah, I think Ambassadors of Death does deserve kudos. I think it's probably the most active the Brigadier ever is in a story.
Yeah,
would you agree with that? Because he goes on that really intense fight in the warehouse.
Yeah, the action scenes are brilliant in this story. By the way, it's like some of the best action scenes ever in Doctor Who.
And they escort the Recovery 7 pod, but they get stolen, and then he and his army platoon, whatever, are overpowered. That is from this story, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And it's some really great scenes, and I think my boyfriend once brought up, why didn't the Brigadier get promoted just for this story alone? He deserved. But yeah, that's great. Liz Shaw, always top tier, flawless goddess, and it's a pretty great story. But yeah, it is a bit cluttered in places.
Yeah, no, It is a great, but basically what you said. I mean, there's not really much more to say on it after that.
I also think, and this is just kind of a nitpick. It is a very tiny nitpick that I have with season 7 as a whole. The cliffhangers are really abrupt.
Really, I quite like some of them. Okay. Well, basically, the cliffhangers, they're pretty terrible at the end of an episode, but they're great at the beginning of an episode in this story.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Actually, I've just had a thought. You said that this is one of the best unit stories, and I think the reason why the unit is so great in this is because it's more of a kind of Earth-based conspiracy story rather than kind of fighting an alien story. Because unit are pretty useless at fighting aliens, but when it comes to conspiracies, pretty good. Because obviously we had the invasion earlier, and it kind of makes me wish that unit had more stories like this, because there's maybe a few too many alien invasion stories in the Pertwee era, and perhaps we could have had more kind of conspiracy stories. Because look at the best stories. For unit, Invasion, Ambassadors of Death, Inferno, Mind of Evil. There's not any invading. Well, okay, there is invading aliens, but unit isn't necessarily focused on that aspect of the story.
I think Invasion of the Dinosaurs is a pretty good one as well.
Yeah, and that's another one with a conspiracy in as well.
Yeah, but then you've got some other duff ones like the Claws of Axos, where unit are just kind of there. They don't really do much.
Yeah, and that's very much kind of an alien one. Although I do love Claws of Axos, not going to insult Claws of
Axos. That's fair enough. But yeah, that's David Whitaker, and
you can give some final thoughts.
Yeah, we give a conclusion. He was a lovely man. He's great at character moments. He helped to flesh out some of the show's best characters in some of the most effective ways. His plotting is hit and miss, but when he had his head screwed on just right, he could deliver really.
Yeah, when it hits perfectly, but when it misses, it's just a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Basically.
Shall we give what we think the best and his weakest stories are?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. That's a good way to end it.
I think his best. You may disagree.
Oh no. Not.
It's Enemy of the World.
No.
But Power of the Daleks is a close second. It's a close second. Power of the Daleks.
Power of the Daleks is the best. It's. I love that story so much. I love. It's so good. Yeah. What's the worst then?
Worst is probably
it's a big toss-up, isn't it, between two stories? It's like, which is worse?
Yeah, they're all still.
I think at the end of the day, you need to think of it along these lines. Edge of Destruction is a more successful story than The Wheel in Space. Edge of Destruction does what it's supposed to, whereas Wheel in Space doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, Wheel in Space probably is the weakest, and even then I'd probably still give it like a 7 out of 10 because I just really... if it's Troughton, I'm good. I'm just really easy for Troughton.
Yeah, so it's like, all the stories 10 out of 10 apart from episode 2, which is 0 out of 10. That's what drags it down for you, right?
Yeah, like all the Troughton era I can get down with. Even these meh ones like Wheel in Space, except for the Space Pirates.
Well, that one barely features Troughton.
Yeah, that explains why it's so crap. Because he's barely in it.
Oh well, so I did not expect this video to go on for this long. Wow, this is a long video. Yeah. This is one of the longest non-live stream videos on my channel. In fact, it might be the longest non-live stream video.
If we do more collabs in the future, you should probably get used to that because when I collabed with Connor a few times, he was like, for one of them, he was like, right, this should only probably last 70 minutes, and then it ended up going on for like 4 hours.
Oh, well, that's just Connor's channel. Every video, like whenever I go to Connor's channel to do a video, it's like, right, I'm going to be here for at least 5 hours. I was literally doing a 5-hour stream the other day, which actually go check out Genesis Van Drazani's channel, guys. Because I actually did a really good 5-hour video with him the other day where we kind of were critiquing a video which was saying that Twice Upon a Time was actually good. Yeah, we literally spent 5 hours doing it, but it's because we were very meticulous in terms of picking apart the video because we really don't agree.
Yeah. So your best and worst would be Power and Wheel, basically.
Yeah, although I don't know, I feel bad about putting Wheel last because I do actually enjoy half of Wheel, whereas Edge of Destruction I don't really care for either way. I mean, it's important, its place, but I don't really care for it either. But whatever, yeah, it's something like that. You could put Wheel or Edge of Destruction there. You can decide whichever you would prefer me to have. That's what it is. The viewer.
But all in all, David Whitaker is a glorious writer. We have no choice but to stan.
Praise him.
Resurrect him, please.
Well, yes. So, yeah. Thank you very much, David Whitaker, for your brilliant stories, and thank you very much, Will, for coming on my channel today.
But of course, I hope to return someday, even if for whatever project. I don't mind what.
Certainly will. I mean, yeah. There's usually a place on a live stream or a panel discussion at some point.
Ooh, I look forward to such a project when it arises. I'm terrible at these outro type things.
Yeah, no, it's a very...
My audience support laugh.
Yes, very good discussion. Yeah, I sometimes like to do very awkward endings, but I'm going to do a very, very nice ending. Right? Farewell, my... Actually, what's the name for baby slugs? Or slugs' children? Did you search that since you're on Wikipedia?
Slug children. Not slug children, but piss off, Google. What's our slug children called? What are slug children called?
See, this is great end of the video.
God. It doesn't say.
What?
Just say bye twat. Just say bye twat and be on with it.
Slugs, they're not even naming little baby slugs. So I can't refer to my audience as my little baby slugs.
Call them terrestrial gastropod mollusks.
Piss off, gits.